Ethan Reed had worked at the Intergalactic Research Base for only 3 months, yet every day still felt like walking through a dream. Humans and aliens working side by side, a sight that once belonged in old science fiction movies, was now his daily reality. Shimmering blue walls, humming machines, and the constant murmur of different voices filled the corridors. That morning, Ethan carried a stack of digital files, rushing toward the laboratory. His shift had started late again, and his mind was full of formulas and system reports. Then as he reached the main corridor, he saw her, Lyra, a Valorian scientist. She was tall, silver-skinned, and graceful like moving light. Her eyes glowed faintly violet. Ethan had seen her before, but never spoken to her. Everyone said Valorians were cold, proud, and didn't like humans much. But Ethan had never believed in stereotypes. So when he reached the door and she was right behind him, he did what came naturally. He held it open. Just a small act of kindness. A simple human thing, but Lyra froze. Her steps stopped mid-motion. Her body stiffened. Her eyes blinked once and then locked on him, sharp and confused. For a long second, she didn't move. She just stood there in silence, as if the world had paused. Ethan smiled awkwardly, still holding the door. After you?" he said lightly. No reaction. People in the corridor started to notice. 2 human engineers glanced up from their tablets. An alien technician slowed down, sensing the tension. The air suddenly felt heavier. Ethan's arms started to ache, but he didn't dare let go now. "It's okay," he said nervously. "I'm just holding it open." Lyra's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Why?" Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried a strange cold weight. Ethan blinked. "Why, because it's polite?" Her expression hardened. "Polite?" She repeated the word slowly, as if testing it like something bitter on her tongue. Ethan nodded, smiling again, unsure what else to do. "Yeah, you know, humans usually hold doors open for others, especially for women." The hallway went even quieter. Lyra's face changed. Not with anger, but with something deeper. Offense, disbelief. She stepped closer, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "You believe I cannot open it myself?" Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. He hadn't meant that at all. Before he could answer, she walked past him. Not through the open door, but around him. Her chin raised high, her steps sharp and deliberate. She touched the wall panel herself, letting the door slide shut behind her. Ethan stood frozen now. The humans nearby exchanged looks. A few whispered. One even snickered quietly. "What just happened?" Ethan murmured under his breath. He walked into the lab a minute later, still puzzled, still feeling that weird sting of embarrassment. Lyra was there already, standing at her workstation, her posture perfect. She didn't look at him once. The rest of the shift dragged painfully. Every time Ethan glanced at her, she was focused. Too focused, like he didn't exist. When the team broke for lunch, she left early without a word. Later, in the cafeteria, Ethan sat with Mira, a communications officer who had worked on the base for years. He told her what happened. She listened carefully, then sighed. "Oh no, Ethan," she said, shaking her head. "You shouldn't have done that." "What? Holding a door?" he asked, confused. "For Valorians," Mira explained, "offering help is like questioning their strength, especially in public. They see it as humiliation, a sign that you think they're weak." Ethan's eyes widened. "Seriously? I was just being nice." "I know," Mira said gently. "But they don't see it that way. Their culture values self-sufficiency above everything. A Valorian would rather struggle than accept help, even if it's harmless." Ethan leaned back, groaning softly. "Great, so I just insulted a high-ranking alien scientist in front of half the base." "Pretty much," Mira said with a half-smile. "But don't worry. You're human. They know we're different." Ethan chuckled nervously, but inside he wasn't laughing. The moment replayed in his head again and again. Lyra's frozen stare, her cutting question, the silence around them. He hadn't meant to offend anyone. Yet somehow his small act of human decency had turned into a cultural disaster. As the day ended, Ethan stood in front of the same door where it all began. The corridor was quiet now. He placed his hand on the wall where the sensor still glowed faintly. "Politeness is weakness," he murmured, remembering Lyra's reaction. "Guess we don't see the universe the same way." But deep down he wasn't angry. He was curious, why did kindness mean shame to her people? What kind of world taught that lesson? He didn't know yet, but one thing was certain. He wanted to understand, and tomorrow he would try again. Because maybe, just maybe, one small human gesture could open a bigger door than either of them expected. The next morning, Ethan entered the lab earlier than usual. The memory of yesterday's door incident still haunted him. Every time he thought about it, his stomach twisted with embarrassment. He told himself it wasn't a big deal, but it felt like one. The way Lyra's eyes had looked at him, cold and distant, was something he couldn't forget. When he stepped into the room, Lyra was already there, working in silence. Her long silver fingers moved swiftly across the glowing console. The room buzzed softly with machine hums, but between them, an invisible wall of tension stood. Ethan wanted to say something, maybe an apology, but he didn't know what words could fix what he didn't understand, so he quietly took his seat and started his work. After a few minutes, a small voice came from behind him. "Hey, Ethan." It was Tariq, another human engineer, and his friend. "I heard about what happened yesterday," he said with a grin. "You really pulled a cultural grenade, huh?" Ethan sighed. "Yeah, apparently holding a door is offensive now." Tariq chuckled. "To them, maybe. But don't beat yourself up. You're not the first human to confuse a Valorian." Ethan nodded, though it didn't make him feel much better. He couldn't stop thinking about how strange it was. A gesture meant to show respect becoming a reason for insult. Later that afternoon, the lab supervisor, a calm older alien named Dr. Sarix, gathered everyone for a briefing. His voice was deep and rhythmic with a tone that carried authority. "Today," Dr. Sarix said, "we discuss cooperation protocols between species. There have been misunderstandings." Ethan felt the weight of those words immediately. He knew they were about him and the door. Lyra didn't look at him, but she knew too. Her jaw tightened slightly, though her face remained calm. Dr. Sarix continued, "In Valorian culture, assistance without request is considered an invasion of pride. We are taught from childhood to rely only on our own strength. A hand offered freely may feel like a chain." Ethan listened closely. The more he heard, the more alien it truly felt. "So," he said carefully, "help is seen as disrespect?" Dr. Sarix nodded. "Yes, because it assumes weakness. On Valoria, dependence is shameful. Every being must prove their worth by surviving, not by leaning on others." Ethan frowned slightly. "That's sad," he whispered. Lyra's head turned sharply toward him. Her eyes gleamed with quiet fire. "Sad," she repeated. "No, it is strength. On our world, no one waits to be saved. We act. We endure." Her tone wasn't angry, just fierce. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Ethan met her gaze. "And on ours," he said softly, "we believe helping each other is strength." A strange silence followed, not hostile, but full of thought. Dr. Sarix finally spoke again. "That is the beauty of this station," he said. "Here, we must learn that neither belief is wrong, only different." The meeting ended soon after, but the word stayed with both of them. That evening, Ethan walked through the base corridors again, passing humans laughing, aliens chatting in soft harmonic voices, and drones rolling by. He noticed little details now. How Valorians always walked alone, how they never reached out for assistance. Even when struggling with heavy equipment, they valued independence like oxygen. He finally understood what Mira had told him, but understanding didn't erase curiosity. Why did they live that way? What history made them fear kindness? He found Lyra in the observation deck later that night, staring out the giant glass window at the galaxy beyond. Stars shimmered like living diamonds. He hesitated, then stepped closer. "Hey," he said quietly. She didn't turn, but she said, "You should not be here, human." "I just wanted to understand," he said. "Yesterday, I didn't mean to insult you. Where I come from, holding a door is a way of saying you matter." Finally, she turned to face him. Her expression had softened, just a little. "On Valoria," she said, "if someone holds a door for you, they say you are weak. It means you cannot carry your own weight. It means pity." Ethan thought for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Maybe that's where we're different. We don't help because someone is weak. We help because someone is worth helping." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. For the first time, her eyes didn't look cold. There was confusion and something like respect. "You are strange, human," she said finally. "But perhaps not foolish," Ethan grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." Lyra turned back toward the stars. "Do not expect the same from others," she said quietly. "Most Valorians will not forgive such an offense so easily." "Then I'll just have to earn it," Ethan said. Lyra glanced at him again, a flicker of amusement in her glowing eyes. "We shall see." As Ethan walked away, he couldn't help but smile. The awkward doorway had opened more than just tension. It had opened understanding. And for the first time, the vast distance between human and alien didn't seem quite so impossible. The next day began with tension thick enough to feel in the air. Everyone in the laboratory sensed something unspoken between Ethan and Lyra. Their earlier misunderstanding had spread through the base faster than a data signal. Some found it funny, others awkward. But for Ethan, it was neither. He just wanted to fix things. When he entered the lab, Lyra was standing near the energy console, reviewing data projections that floated like blue mist in the air. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical. She didn't look at him, not even for a second. Ethan hesitated. Should he say good morning? Or stay quiet? The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. Finally, he decided to take a chance. "Lyra," he said carefully, "can we talk?" Her glowing eyes flicked toward him but showed no warmth. "About what?" "Yesterday," he replied. "I think we started off on the wrong foot." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "Wrong foot?" she repeated as if translating his human idiom in her mind. "I mean," Ethan rubbed his neck nervously. "I didn't mean to offend you. I was just trying to be polite." The word polite made her expression harden. She turned away. "You humans use that word as if it makes weakness sound noble," she said flatly. Ethan frowned. "Weakness? You really think kindness is weakness?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked closer, her tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. "On Valoria, strength is not only power of body, it is control of self. We stand, we act, and we never rely on another to carry our weight." Ethan looked up at her, his tone calm but filled with emotion. "But what's wrong with helping someone? It doesn't mean they can't do it themselves. It just means they don't have to." Lyra blinked slowly. "You misunderstand. On my world, to offer help is to steal pride. To accept help is to lose it." Her words hit Ethan like a puzzle with no answer. He wanted to argue but also wanted to understand. "That's a hard way to live," he said quietly. "For us, it is the only way," she replied. "Even our children are taught to survive without comfort. That is how we thrive." The conversation drew attention. Two nearby engineers paused their work, pretending to check instruments but really listening. The air was tense but electric, like two worlds meeting through words. Ethan crossed his arms. "Maybe that's why humans and Valorians don't always get along. You think needing someone is weakness? We think it's what makes life meaningful." Lyra's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in thought. "You humans," she said softly, "always need reasons to feel good about imperfection." Ethan smiled faintly. "And you aliens always need reasons to hide your feelings." For the first time, Lyra's lip twitched, a tiny sign of amusement or disbelief. Ethan couldn't tell. "You are brave to speak like this," she said finally. "I'm not brave," he said honestly, "just trying to understand." The door behind them opened suddenly, breaking the moment. Dr. Sarix entered, holding a holographic pad. "Good," he said, unaware of the tension. "Ethan, Lyra, you will be working together on the energy core test today. A human's perception and a Valorian's precision. You both learn better together." Lyra stiffened. Ethan tried not to smile. "Sure," he said. "We can handle that." As Dr. Sarix left, Lyra glared at him slightly. "Do not think this changes anything," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Didn't think it did. The next few hours were filled with silence and work. They stood side by side, reviewing codes, analyzing magnetic pulses, their hands occasionally brushing across the same console. Every glance carried tension but also curiosity. When Ethan accidentally dropped a tool, Lyra immediately bent down to pick it up, then froze halfway. Their eyes met. For a moment, she seemed torn between instinct and pride. Finally, she stood upright and let him pick it up himself. Ethan chuckled softly. "Progress," he said under his breath. Lyra frowned. "What?" "Nothing," he replied quickly. Later that evening, when their shift ended, Lyra approached him near the door, the same one that had started everything. The corridor was quiet, bathed in soft blue light. "You spoke boldly today," she said. "Most humans would have stayed silent," Ethan shrugged. "I guess I'm not most humans." Lyra looked at him for a long time. "You confuse me," she admitted. "You act with no fear, yet with no desire to dominate. You offer help, but not to control." "Why?" he smiled gently. "Because that's just what being human means." For the first time since they met, Lyra didn't look angry or offended. Her voice softened. "Perhaps I judged too quickly," Ethan nodded. "And maybe I didn't think enough." A long silence passed, not cold this time, but calm. Then Lyra gave a small, almost invisible nod. "Tomorrow," she said, "we work again, maybe. You can teach me more about your kind." Ethan grinned. "Deal. But no promises about holding doors." Lyra gave a quiet hum that almost sounded like laughter as she walked away. For the first time, Ethan felt the wall between them begin to crack, not from force, but from understanding. The next morning, the base lights dimmed to a soft sunrise hue, marking the beginning of a new rotation cycle. Ethan arrived at the laboratory early again, but this time he wasn't nervous. Something between him and Lyra had shifted after their talk. The air still held distance, yes, but now it wasn't cold. It was curious. When Lyra entered, her posture was straight as always, but her eyes carried a different kind of look. Not anger, not offense, just quiet evaluation. "Morning," Ethan said, giving a small smile. Lyra nodded once. "Human," she greeted simply, though her voice was less icy than before. They began their work in silence, running data checks and calibrating systems for the energy reactor test. Everything went smoothly until Dr. Sarix entered the room. His eyes, deep and calm, scanned both of them. "You two," he said. "You have learned much through conflict. That is good. But understanding words is not the same as understanding hearts." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Dr. Sarix folded his hands behind his back. "Lyra, you spoke of strength through independence. Ethan, you spoke of strength through compassion. Perhaps it is time you both proved which one holds more truth." Ethan blinked. "Prove it? How?" Lyra looked at Dr. Sarix with surprise. "You wish us to compete?" He smiled faintly. "Not compete. Learn. You will take part in the Valorian Trial of Endurance, a cultural exchange exercise. You both will face physical and mental challenges designed to test strength and cooperation." Ethan's jaw dropped. "You want me to, run obstacle courses with aliens?" Dr. Sarix nodded calmly. "If you wish to truly understand each other, you must live each other's values." Lyra's silver eyes flicked toward Ethan. "He will not last an hour," she said quietly, though there was no cruelty in her tone, only certainty. Ethan grinned. "Guess we'll find out." Later that day, the two of them stood inside the training chamber, a vast dome filled with holographic landscapes. The air shimmered as the simulation began, transforming the room into a rugged alien canyon bathed in violet light. Lyra explained, "The trial is not just about strength. It tests how one responds to exhaustion, isolation, and fear. There is no reward, only survival." "Sounds fun," Ethan muttered sarcastically, tightening the strap on his utility harness. The first test was endurance, climbing steep cliffs under simulated gravity waves. Lyra moved with graceful precision, her body built for this environment. Ethan, panting and sweating, followed as best he could. Every time he slipped, she didn't stop or offer help. She simply watched. When he reached the top, gasping for breath, she said quietly, "You could have asked for assistance." Ethan smirked through the exhaustion. "Then I'd fail your test of pride, right?" Her expression softened slightly. "You remember well." The next challenge was mental, navigating a maze filled with shifting energy barriers. Lyra calculated every step, her mind a map of logic. Ethan relied on instinct, listening to faint hums and patterns in the light. At one point, a wall of plasma flared between them. Lyra stepped forward, scanning for a safe route. Ethan saw an unstable circuit and shouted, "Wait!" He reached for her arm instinctively on as she froze, startled by the contact. "I said wait," he repeated, pointing. "That one's unstable. You'll burn through your suit." Lyra paused, examining it. He was right. Slowly she nodded. "You noticed faster than I did." Ethan shrugged. Humans are good at guessing when things are about to explode. A small sound, almost a laugh, escaped her lips. It lasted only a second, but it felt like a breakthrough. Hours passed. They faced scorching winds, simulated hunger, and puzzles meant to break focus. Ethan stumbled often, but never gave up. Lyra watched him, puzzled by his persistence. He didn't have the speed or strength of a Valorian, but his determination burned brighter than the holographic sun above them. Finally, at the end of the trial, they reached a narrow bridge across a pit of glowing energy. Lyra went first, but halfway across, the structure flickered. The simulation glitched. She lost balance for the first time. Her foot slipped. Ethan reacted without thinking. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her back with all his strength. The system stabilized. She was safe. Lyra stared at his hand holding hers. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then softly she asked, "Why did you do that?" He smiled faintly. "Because you'd do the same for me." She hesitated. "Would I?" Ethan's smile widened. "I think you just did, man, when you waited." Silence filled the chamber. Then slowly, Lyra's lips curved. Not a full smile, but close. "You are strange, Ethan Reed, but perhaps you understand strength better than I thought." He laughed softly. "Guess we both learned something." As the simulation faded, Dr. Sarix's voice echoed through the speakers. "Excellent. The trial is complete. You both passed, not by conquering each other, but by trusting." Lyra looked at Ethan, then nodded. "Trust," she said slowly. "That is your strength." "And maybe," Ethan said, "it can be yours too." As they exited the chamber side by side, Lyra's usual rigid posture seemed to relax just slightly. For the first time since they met, she walked beside him. Not ahead, not behind. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan knew. The real door between them had just begun to open. The next day felt different. Something unspoken had changed between Ethan and Lyra. Their time in the trial of endurance had carved out a kind of respect neither could deny. Ethan had proved that humans weren't as fragile as the Valorians believed, and Lyra had begun to see that compassion could exist without weakness. But now, another test awaited them, one not planned by Dr. Sarix or the base commanders. This time, life itself would throw the challenge. The day began as usual in the main lab. The hum of machines filled the air. Data lights danced across glass panels, and distant engines vibrated through the metal floors. Ethan was finishing a systems check on the energy core stabilizer, the heart of the station's power grid. Lyra stood beside him, analyzing plasma flow charts. "The readings seem inconsistent," she said with a small frown. Ethan leaned over. "You're right. The containment ratio's dropping. That's not supposed to happen." They both turned toward the reactor chamber, a massive column of pulsing light surrounded by transparent shielding. Inside it, the energy rippled unevenly, like a storm trapped in a bottle. Lyra's eyes narrowed. If the balance fails, the radiation surge could destroy half the station. Ethan's voice dropped. "Then we need to fix it, and now." They moved fast. Alarms began to echo, red lights flashing across the lab. The calm research facility transformed into chaos. Engineers shouted, systems beeped in warning, and the once steady hum turned into a low, angry roar. Dr. Sarix's voice came over the intercom, steady but urgent. "All teams evacuate Sector 4. Energy spike detected." Lyra glanced at Ethan. "We cannot leave. The stabilizer must be manually reset." Ethan shook his head. "That means someone has to go inside the control tunnel. It's overloaded with radiation." "I am immune to short exposure," she said quickly, stepping forward. Ethan blocked her. "Not for long. You'll still burn out in minutes." Lyra's tone sharpened. "Then who? You cannot survive it either." He looked at the flashing control pad, then at her. "I've worked on that system longer. I know its rhythm. I can make it fast." She stared at him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "You would risk your life for this?" "For everyone," he said simply. "Including you." Before she could stop him, Ethan sealed the emergency door behind him and entered the glowing control tunnel. Inside, the world turned white and hot. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The sound of pulsing energy filled his ears like a heartbeat. Ethan crawled toward the stabilizer node, shielding his eyes. His fingers moved fast, typing codes, reconnecting circuits, overriding safety locks. Outside, Lyra watched through the glass, her fists clenched. "Human," she shouted through the comm. "Your body cannot handle this level of radiation." Ethan's voice crackled back. "Then you better keep the door ready, and I'm not dying for nothing." He found the last circuit, its wires flickering like veins of fire. One wrong move and the core would explode. His vision blurred, but he pressed on. Sweat mixed with the metallic taste in his mouth. His hand trembled, then clicked the final sequence. The alarm stopped. The reactor's violent hum softened into a steady rhythm again. Outside, the lights returned to calm blue. The station lived. Lyra slammed the override panel and rushed in before the automatic seals could lock. "Ethan!" He was lying on the floor, coughing, weak but smiling. "Told you. Humans are tougher than we look." Lyra knelt beside him, her silver skin glowing faintly under the light. For a moment, her cold composure vanished. "You foolish man," she whispered. "You risked your life for strangers," he chuckled weakly. "For friends, too." She looked at him, confused yet moved. "Why would you do that? What do you gain from it?" Ethan smiled faintly. "You wouldn't understand, Lyra. It's not about gain. It's just what we do." She stared at him, her violet eyes shimmering with something she didn't recognize. Emotion. Later, after medical drones carried Ethan to recovery, Lyra stayed behind in the silent lab. She stood near the reactor glass, watching the calm energy within. Her reflection stared back at her, proud, unbending, yet shaken. For the first time, she questioned the lessons of her world. On Valoria, she had been taught that mercy was weakness, that help was humiliation, and that no one should ever risk themselves for another. But Ethan had done exactly that, without hesitation, for her people, for her. When he finally woke in the infirmary hours later, she was there, waiting. "You should not have survived," she said quietly. Ethan grinned. "Guess someone upstairs likes me." She tilted her head. "Or perhaps, you have proven your kind strength in a way mine cannot." He smiled softly. "Maybe strength isn't about standing alone, Lyra. Maybe it's about standing together." She didn't answer right away. Then slowly she said, "Perhaps you are right, human. Perhaps your way has power too." As she turned to leave, Ethan called out, "Hey, Lyra." She paused. "Next time a door opens," he said with a tired grin, "you first." For the first time she laughed in a quiet, musical sound that filled the sterile room with warmth. And in that moment, both of them knew the real test wasn't surviving danger. It was learning to understand. Days passed after the reactor incident. The intergalactic research base returned to its calm routine, but for Ethan and Lyra, nothing felt the same. Ethan was recovering slowly in the infirmary. The medical drones buzzed quietly, scanning his body for radiation traces. His strength was returning, but his mind was restless. He kept replaying the moment when Lyra's hand had pulled him back, how her voice had cracked, how her proud eyes had softened for the first time. Across the base, Lyra stood in the observation deck again, looking out at the stars. The galaxy shimmered like a sea of diamonds. Yet for once, she wasn't thinking about science or duty. She was thinking about him. Ethan had done something no Valorian ever would. He had risked his life, not for glory, not for command, but because he cared. That single act had broken everything she had been taught since childhood. She remembered her mentor's words from years ago. To depend is to die. To feel is to falter. The strong need no one. But now those words felt hollow. When Lyra finally went to see Ethan, the human medics were already teasing him. "You're lucky, man," one said. "The alien doctor herself came to check on you." Ethan laughed weakly. "Guess I'm more interesting than I thought." When Lyra entered, the room went quiet. The medic stepped out politely, leaving the two alone. Ethan smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." Lyra folded her arms. "I had to confirm your recovery," she said, her tone calm but not cold. "You disobeyed orders, entered a restricted zone, and nearly destroyed yourself." Ethan grinned. "You say that like it's a bad thing." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed softly, lowering her gaze. "It is confusing. You risked everything without gain, without logic. That's kind of what humans do best," Ethan replied. "We act on heart, not just logic." Lyra studied him closely. "Heart," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "On Valoria, such a word means nothing. Then maybe that's what your world's missing, he said quietly. It's not about weakness, Lyra, it's about connection. We survive because we stand together. Her glowing violet eyes softened. You believe unity is strength, he nodded. I don't just believe it. I've lived it. She walked closer, her expression thoughtful. And yet your kind fights wars among itself. You speak of unity, but destroy your own. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, we're complicated. But even through the worst, we find a way to care again. We always do. That answer silenced her. She couldn't argue with it. Something inside her, something old and proud, began to crack. Later that night, Lyra returned to her quarters and opened her personal hollow diary. For the first time, her entry was not about research or performance. Today the human made me question everything, she wrote. Their strength is not in dominance or control, but in emotion. They break easily, yet they rise again. Perhaps that is a greater power than any we know. She stopped writing, staring at the last line. Then she whispered to herself, Ethan Reed, you are dangerous. Not because you are strong, but because you make others feel. The next morning, Ethan was cleared for duty. When he walked back into the lab, everyone clapped lightly, humans and aliens both. Even Dr. Sarix gave a nod of respect. Lyra stood at her workstation, pretending to focus, but Ethan noticed the small smile on her face. Back to work? He asked cheerfully. Back to balance, she replied. You have caused enough chaos. Yeah, Ethan said. But it was the good kind of chaos. Lyra turned to face him, her tone more serious now. I still do not understand your way fully, but I will learn. If we are to work together, I must see the world as you do, even if only for a moment. Ethan nodded. Then maybe one day I'll see it through your eyes too. Later, during a joint meeting, Lyra surprised everyone. When a human intern dropped a tablet, Lyra instinctively bent down to help. The room went silent. For Valorians, that gesture was unheard of. She realized it only after she did it. But she didn't take it back. The intern blinked in surprise. Thank you, he said shyly. Lyra gave a small nod. You are welcome. Ethan caught her eye across the room, smiling with quiet pride. She rolled her eyes lightly, but her lips curved ever so slightly upward. That evening, they met again at the observation deck. The stars shone bright like before. You've changed, Ethan said softly. Or perhaps, Lyra replied, I have only remembered something forgotten. What's that? She looked out at the stars. That strength is not just standing alone. It is knowing when to reach out, and when to accept the hand offered. Ethan smiled. That sounds a lot like progress. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes glowing warmly now. Perhaps, or perhaps it is the beginning of something neither of us can define yet. They stood there in silence. Two beings from worlds apart, united not by science, not by duty, but by understanding. For the first time, Lyra truly felt, and for Ethan, that was the greatest success of all. A week passed since the reactor incident, but the story of what happened still echoed through every corner of the intergalactic research base. To the humans, Ethan Reed had become a quiet hero. To the Valorians, he had become an enigma, a man who had shown courage not for rank or duty, but for something far greater, compassion. But for Ethan, it wasn't about fame or recognition. What mattered most to him was that one alien scientist, Lyra, had begun to see him differently. Every morning now, she greeted him with a nod, sometimes even a hint of a smile, and though her tone was still formal, her eyes had changed. They no longer looked at him as an outsider, but as an equal. That day, Dr. Sarix called for a joint assembly in the central hall, humans and Valorians together. We gathered to celebrate the restoration of the base and the success of the Unity mission, he announced. But above all, we gathered to honor understanding, the bridge between species. Ethan stood near the back, uncomfortable under all the attention. He never liked speeches, but when Sarix called his name, the room filled with applause. Lyra was among the first to clap. As Ethan stepped forward, Sarix said, Humanity has shown us that strength is not only in resistance, but in resilience, Nor. The power to stand again after falling, and to care even when logic says not to. Let this be a lesson to all of us. Ethan scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed. I just did what anyone would do. Lyra spoke up from the audience, her voice clear. No, Ethan Reed. You did what few would dare. You taught us that courage can come wrapped in kindness. The room fell silent. Her words hung in the air like light, simple but powerful. Ethan met her gaze, smiling softly. Guess we've both done some teaching lately. A faint laugh rippled through the crowd, breaking the tension. For the first time in the base's history, humans and Valorians laughed together. Later that day, Ethan walked through the same hallway where it all began, the one with that door. The memory still made him smile. Back then, he had just been trying to be polite. A small gesture that had almost started a diplomatic crisis. Now that same gesture had turned into the symbol of something far bigger, understanding between worlds. As he reached the door, it opened, and Lyra appeared on the other side. They both stopped for a second, facing each other in silence. Then Ethan grinned. So who goes first this time? Lyra looked at the door, then at him. Her eyes glowed softly, full of humor and warmth. It seems only fair that we go together, Ethan chuckled. Deal. They walked through side by side. Later that evening, they met again on the observation deck. The stars looked different tonight. Brighter, closer somehow. Ethan leaned on the railing. Hard to believe all this started with a door. Lyra folded her arms, standing beside him. A door can divide or connect. It depends who chooses to open it, he smiled. So what do you think? Are we connected now? Lyra's gaze lingered on the stars before turning to him. Once I believed that unity weakened strength. Now, I believe it transforms it. That's a nice way to put it, Ethan said softly. Guess both our worlds were a little wrong. Perhaps, she replied. Or perhaps we were both incomplete and until we met. Ethan looked at her quietly, touched by the honesty in her voice. That means a lot, Lyra. She nodded once. It means change. And change is not weakness, and it is growth. The intercom buzzed suddenly. Dr. Sarix's voice filled the air. All personnel, please note. The Council has officially approved the Human-Valorian Cultural Exchange Program. Cooperation will now extend across both worlds. Ethan's eyes widened. You hear that? Looks like we started something big. Lyra smiled faintly. Something. Human. Something ours. Ethan corrected. They stood side by side, silent for a while, watching a distant planet spin slowly across the stars. The space between them felt lighter now, not filled with misunderstanding, but quiet trust. Finally, Lyra turned toward him. Ethan Reed, she said formally. Thank you. He raised an eyebrow. For what? For showing me that strength can kneel and still remain unbroken. Ethan smiled. And thank you for showing me that pride doesn't always mean arrogance. Sometimes it just means you care enough to stand tall. She tilted her head slightly, amused. You speak like a poet now. Must be all the alien influence, he said with a wink. For the first time she laughed, truly laughed. It was soft and melodic, like a song. As they left the deck, the doors slid open automatically. This time neither held it. Neither hesitated. They walked through, together, and somewhere deep within the base, under the glow of alien light, a human and a Valorian had done what neither world had ever managed before. They had built respect, and not through power, not through war, but through understanding. A simple door had started it, but what came after was the beginning of peace.